Hi everyone. After taking a needed week off, I decided to come back with a primer on personality disordered women and the dangers they represent to men. That's coming up on An Ear for Men. Before we get started, let me make a few things clear. What I have to say is not designed to demonize women, or men for that matter, who have personality disorders. The content here is designed to benefit those who have been victimized by personality disordered individuals, and to arm those who may encounter them in the future. If you look back at any of the older videos that I did with Dr. T on this subject, you will find comment areas saturated with complaints, many of them by people who identify as having personality disorders. There are claims that the videos are stigmatizing. There are allegations that the videos cause people with personality disorders to feel bad about themselves, and that the videos are callously insensitive to those suffering from those disorders. Allow me to make it clear here that I don't give a damn about those complaints. And it's not because I am insensitive or callous, and it is not because I wish to demonize or stigmatize people with personality disorders or anyone else for that matter. The purpose of these talks is to offer support and information to the victims of personality disordered individuals, particularly male victims. Indeed, if you look through the comments on those videos, you will see that the complaints typify one of the problems identified in these talks. People with personality disorders have an unfortunate tendency to abuse people, then demand sympathy from the victims for having a mental illness that predisposes them toward being abusive. They want to punch someone in the face and then complain that the victim's face made their knuckles hurt. That attitude will not get any sympathy here or any further airtime. There are countless online and real-world resources for people with personality disorders, many of them an enabling part of the problem. This channel is not going to be one of them, so please consider that your trigger warning. I'm going to talk here in straightforward, blunt terms to and about victims, and I mean real victims, namely the people who endure physical and emotional abuse, false allegations, constant drama and hysteria, and the grinding tension that mark the lives of those who live with personality disordered individuals. If you have a personality disorder, I wish you luck in getting the support and treatment you need, but look for it elsewhere. If you choose to come here demanding attention and sympathy in an environment to give those things to the people you victimized, then it is very likely that I will just delete your comments and prevent you from commenting here in the future. Now, let's proceed. The best thing that anyone can do to prevent the havoc a disordered personality can inflict in your life is to prevent contact with them as much as possible. Stay away from people with personality disorders much in the same way you would stay away from heroin addicts, meth heads, pedophiles, and arsonists. In the same way you won't let a junkie have access to your bank account, don't let a BPD have access to your daily living. To do that reliably, you have to know one when you see her. As a baseline, I'm going to use the diagnostic criteria from the DSM-4. There's a different version of this in the DSM-5, but it has changed, I think for political reasons, so I'm sticking with the old book. Every man who still considers pair bonding a natural part of his life should keep these things in mind every time he meets a prospective sexual or romantic partner. The borderline personality disorder is identified by some or all of the following traits. First, frantic efforts to avoid being abandoned by friends and family. Keep in mind here that the borderline's capacity to feel abandoned is staggering. She will be threatened by your friendships, family relationships, even by your hobbies and thoughts that do not focus on her. I conducted groups which had borderline members who felt abandoned if I did not take the seat next to them. Some borderlines are so extreme that they will feel abandoned if you check your mailbox without inviting them to go with you. Now, most are not quite that bad, but if you start seeing a tendency for a woman to feel abandoned that does not seem rational to you, pay attention to it. Next up, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. So what does that bit of word salad mean? It means that her relationships are freaking crazy. She loves you one moment more than anything else in the world. She idealizes you and puts you on a pedestal. Then, the moment she perceives anything in you that triggers her abandonment reflex, she knocks you off that pedestal and hates the ground you walk on. This is particularly dangerous because when she is in the devaluation state, she is capable of doing anything to punish you for disappointing her. This can include anything from verbal abuse to physical attacks and false allegations. If you see this pattern in her, you don't need the rest of this video to convince you to run, but let's cover it anyway. Next up, identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. Translation, borderlines tend to not know fuck all about who they are. This comes with its own problems both for the BPD and those around them. The intrapersonal confusion contributes to wild mood swings that typically result in someone taking the brunt. If you're in the vicinity, that someone is likely to be you. If you think you're the exception, you're being foolish. The takeaway? If she seems unpredictable, it is because she is. You can never know when or where the sudden blow-up is coming, just that it will. Next up, impulsive behaviors that can have dangerous outcomes, such as excessive spending, unsafe sex, substance abuse, or reckless driving. Now, of course, this is bound to happen with borderlines. It is where we just start getting into the deep end of the crazy pool. That wild, crazy sex that attracted you to her? Don't kid yourself that you're the only pony she's going to ride. Borderlines are often attractive and highly sexual. You can see it in the woman who wears come fuck me pumps, excessive makeup, and skin-tight clothing to work in an office. There's a hint here. If she works in a law firm and dresses like she works in a brothel, add it to the diagnostic criteria. She's probably a borderline. That is the hook for so many of them. They lead with a highly sexualized persona and will be the first to allege sexual impropriety on your part when, and not if, you fall out of favor. It does not exactly take spidey sense to figure this out. By the way, don't get in a car with a borderline driving. One nosedive into her abandonment issues and you could end up as a hood ornament. Don't even put it past her to pick a fight so she can turn into a deranged Dale Earnhardt behind the wheel. Now, if you're nuts enough to be attracted to this brand of insanity, and more than a few guys are, more power to you. But know it can end very badly. Please be kind enough to warn your friends and family that you intend on going down with the ship. Next up, suicidal and self-harming behavior. Suicidal ideation and self-mutilation aren't just an expression of the borderline's misery. They are also tools for manipulation and emotional blackmail. I once drove 300 miles to visit a friend. We were going to watch the Super Bowl together in a sports bar 2 miles from his home. He showed up in the middle of the third quarter because his girlfriend was threatening to kill herself if he went. She finally relented and gave her blessings after she knew she had ruined the event for both of us. If you're more than 17 or 18 years old, you've likely either experienced something like this or know someone who has. Controlling you with threats of self-harm is her ace in the hole. And yes, This is a nightmare for her too, which she will remind you is the only thing you're allowed to talk about the moment you get tired of the manipulation. If she tells you those marks on her forearms are chickenpox scars, do yourself a favor by suspending belief, else the scars will eventually make their way to you. Next, periods of intense depressed mood, irritability, or anxiety lasting a few hours to a few days. Since the focus here is on you, the only thing I have to say about this is look at your life. Living with a borderline will produce exactly those results for you. Expect to be depressed, on edge, and anxious, not for hours or days, but constantly. If you ended up killing yourself after a few years living with a borderline, you would not be the first or last. Next, chronic feelings of boredom or emptiness, which she will fill with one drama after another, mostly with her as the main character and you as the supporting actor and pincushion. She will have other ways of breaking that boredom too, like doing drugs, drinking and driving, maybe banging your friends. That is, if you have any that she's not run off. Borderlines are constantly plagued by emptiness and boredom, which is unfortunate because they don't have any real capacity for either. Next, inappropriate, intense, or uncontrollable anger, often followed by shame and guilt. First of all, inappropriate and uncontrolled anger should be followed by shame and guilt. But don't think her emotional experience of that guilt provides her the moral rudder that it does for most people. The guilt is as transient as her anger. It is just a part of a mood swing, not a corrective emotional state that comes with making mistakes. She will feel guilty for a brief period of time, but will be capable of another tirade in 5 minutes. Finally, dissociative feelings, disconnecting from a sense of identity or out-of-body type feelings, and stress-related paranoid thoughts. Severe cases of stress can also lead to brief psychotic episodes. Okay, now this is wandering into the deepest end of the pool, but it is important to remember that you can drown in the shallow end. It is not the extreme ends of borderline's condition that will get you, but the mildest of their symptoms. The point here is not to make light of what is clearly a disorder that causes great suffering for the person afflicted, but to point out to you that the suffering will not be contained to her. Borderlines don't just feel pain and suffering. They dish it out to anyone close to them. Again, I caution you about the folly of the fantasy that you'll be an exception. You don't have to hate her to get this stuff, and any anger you have toward her is pointless, even if it is justified. Negative feelings about borderlines are worthless unless they serve to direct you out of their path. The question is whether their condition mandates that someone like you tolerate their abuse. That, of course, is up to you. But my experience tells me that men who cling to this kind of abusive relationship have their own psychological issues that warrant attention. All we can do from here, though, is inform men of what to look for and leave them the responsibility of making choices that don't land them in a ditch. Well, that's it for today's talk. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and see you next time. Okay, guys, time for the Thursday tip. Watch out for the love bombs. If you have a woman telling you after a few hours of shared time that you are the most wonderful person she has ever met and gushing praise for you, recognize it for what it is, one of the alternating swings between idealization and devaluation. This is one of the big tells with borderlines, and just because it is a part of their pathology doesn't mean she isn't doing it for a reason. Being on a pedestal feels good to most people, even if they don't admit it. Love bombing, when you are first getting to know each other, is the building of a pedestal from which she will most certainly knock you off. And just knocking you off won't be enough. When you end up on the ground, and you will, she will jump on you wearing stilettos and grind you into the dust. Much safer to spend time with women who actually want to get to know you before deciding what they think about you. Well, thanks again for watching today. Please give us a like and a share on this video and sub to the channel. For those who want to help us keep doing these videos, there's a link to the Patreon in the low bar. Take care now, guys. Bye-bye.